This week on The Futurists, Dr. Kjartan Thorsson.
Sometimes technology tends to follow the funding. So we've had a lot of new startups, which I think are doing great in addiction treatments. But then again, addiction treatments, we're only focusing at the very end and at the really, I would say, the most complicated stage of the opioid journey.
Looking to the future, a startup from Iceland innovates to address the opioid epidemic. In today's episode of The Futurists, our guest host, JP Nicols from our sister podcast, Breaking Banks, spotlights a Healthtech innovator that he met on a recent trip to Iceland that is doing something to address a growing problem. Dr. Kjartan Thorsson, Prescriby, co-founder, acted on concerns noted as an orthopedic doctor and surgeon. He was regularly prescribing 30 to 50 opioid prescriptions a week. Rule of thumb, 1 in 10 patients go on to develop some level of addiction. Rather than contribute to this problem, he and 2 others decided to do something about it, and they developed the first data-driven treatment management platform for addictive medication. They've won support in Iceland, Newfoundland, Canadian healthcare communities, and healthcare professionals there are working to provide safer treatments of addictive medicines across the continuum of care.
So start by introducing yourself and your company.
So my name is Kjartan Thorsson, and I'm the CEO and I'm the co-founder of Prescriby. So I'm a medical doctor, and that's where it all started. I have a background in orthopedics, and we're enabling safer treatments with opioids and other addictive medication.
Opioids, major problem.
Oh yes. And I would say we're really looking at the problem from one angle, and there's another angle, a big angle that we haven't spoken about as much, and that's what leads up to people getting addicted. So there are several ways how people end up with addiction, and one of the ways is, of course, people, they have their unfortunates, and they misstep in the path of life, and they start using drugs for some reason, be it some trauma or whatever is the cause. But then there's a big part of people that started using opioids from prescription opioids. So after a surgery, after some trauma, and the prescriptions get prolonged for various reasons, and they end up not being able to quit. Doctor says, no, I'm not going to make a refill, and what are you going to do?
So then what does the addicted patient do?
I'll just go through I'll go through a classic case that unfortunately I see too often. And this is something, this is not only American, this is not only Icelandic, this is something that happens all over the world. But it's most prevalent in the States, Canada, Iceland, in the Nordics, and western part of Europe. So let's take a simple case. We have a patient that suffers a motorcycle accident. Breaks his back, breaks his spine, goes into the ED and ends up in surgery, spinal fusion, let's say. And spinal fusion, for example, it's a operation that it creates a lot of pain for patients, and they tend to be in pain for many weeks after the surgery. They get discharged from the hospital, and normally these patients, they have to take opioids for many weeks. And what happens is that you develop tolerance, physical tolerance. So let's say you would be taking, let's say Oxycontin, 20 milligrams, 3 times a day, 2 times a day. After 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that, let's say you all of a sudden you think to yourself, well, I don't feel as much pain anymore. I'm just gonna stop taking it. That's when the patient realizes that you get withdrawal symptoms, and it just kind of sneaks up behind you. You get really afraid. So you go back into taking the same doses that you took before, and you get really afraid. You keep on taking the opioids, and you probably don't feel like stopping again. So you go to your doctor, you say, I'm still in pain. You're not an addict. You're afraid, right? Then, let's say 12 weeks pass, 20 weeks pass, and you're still taking opiates, and you're still talking about this pain after the surgery, and then all of a sudden you develop dependency. So you can't imagine the next day you're not having opioids. Then you become anxious and you become reliant to this pill that you've been taking. Then one day, doctor, in goodwill, says, you know what? You've been taking opiates now for 20 weeks and it's just not normal that you're still in pain after a surgery. I'm going to have to stop. Like, if not, authorities, they're going to, talk to me or, whatever may be the cost. But, I can't prescribe this to you anymore. And the patient, what do? You either, you go to the streets and you buy Oxycontin or even worse, fentanyl. Or you get prescribed Suboxone or methadone. And Suboxone and methadone, it's great. But then again, what happened? You had these 20 weeks leading up to the patient getting addicted. And then you're going to give them Suboxone and methadone. And what happens when the patient gets Suboxone and methadone? A lot of times, actually too many times, I would say majority of times, people end up taking methadone and Suboxone almost permanently. It was supposed to be a temporary solution, but it's almost permanent. So all this journey that I just described, the points that we talk about in the media is the top of the iceberg. It's the end of the journey. It's when the patient is using opioids, is using fentanyl from the street, is overdosing, is stealing to get funding to fund their addiction, and we're just focusing on that. We're not focusing on really what leads normal people into becoming addicts. And I think it's stigmatized. I think a lot of people think that addicts, opioid addicts, are, some second level people or something like that. But it's a lot of times it's just normal people that just so happen to have an injury and just snuck up behind them. So this is kind of like this is the awareness that we've been trying to raise, and I've seen it many times in my clinical practice and when I speak to clinicians all over the world. It's always the same story.
So how are you addressing it?
So what we're doing is we're trying to, first of all, we have 3 use cases and 3 points where we can really tackle the problem. First one is preventing people from developing chronic use. So when they get their first refill, let's say after an operation, that's a use case that everybody understands, you're onboarded to our program. So the way that we, for example, do this in Iceland is that we have a GP. Normally GPs, they do the refills. That's how it works here through primary care. And what they do is that, all right, you're coming here in for a refill. We're gonna refer you to our clinic of some sorts, which has a nurse practitioner and a pharmacist, and they onboard the patient into the Prescriby platform, and there we create a treatment plan. So we have an agenda, we have a plan, and then you're going to take the opioids according to this, and we personalize it. Is this something that you can work with? Is this something that that you think that you will manage? Normally the patients, they don't want to get addicted. They say, well, yeah, I think this works for me. All right. And you just ask them, be adherent and just tell us exactly how you're using the prescription drug. And we provide the patient with an app. So we create the treatment plan, personalize it, and we send it to the patient's app. And they interact with the treatment plan. They give us their adherence, they register their symptoms. And then we have a monitoring interface for the same clinicians, so pharmacist and nurse, working with GPs, where they can monitor and triage the patients. So we see exactly, let's say we have 100 patients that are going through treatment. We know that there's, maybe 20 that will have some problem. We know exactly, those are the 20 we have to help. And these 80, they're going towards the right path. They are going towards 0. And these 20, we can intervene, and we have data. So we can actually talk to them, and we know exactly what has been going on. And, so it gives us kind of like a better tool to be able to address the problem and give them real solution to the problem. Second use case is chronic users. So people that have been using opioids or benzodiazepines, Valium, Xanax for years. A lot of patients like that, a lot of them. Tens of thousands here in Iceland, in a society of 390,000 people. and the US has more use than we do. So, and I don't know how many people are there using it. There we have the physicians, especially GPs, and these patients, they normally end up in the primary care, sometimes in pain management treatments. We help them to be able to have a tool to actually offer the patient something. Because the problem today in primary care is that when people come and get their refills, and this is, the 100th refill in 3 years, the GPs, they're all faced with the same problem. We don't have anything to offer them. I don't want to put them straight away to Suboxone or methadone. Not everybody is supposed to go on these medications. So there's like a little gray zone there where they can't offer them anything. So what do? You either do the refill and you have it in the back of your mind, and now you're just maintaining the problem. But if you don't provide them with the refill, then you might be, making it worse. They might end up in the streets. So we're providing kind of like this third pathway, which I would say is the right pathway. So they can onboard them into the same clinic and they can be tapered down. And the third use case is we have tapered down Suboxone and methadone. And again, this is something that has to be really personalized and it has to be done. We have to support the patient and everything. So we can use the same resources and our system to do that. That's more or less how we tackle the problem, and providing this continuum of care where we can intervene in all these places.
Well, talk about the company. How did you start the company? Why did you start the company? And how far along are you? What comes next? Talk about the journey so far.
Right. Well, it started when I was working in orthopedics, and I was prescribing myself 30 to 50 prescriptions each week. And, the rule of thumb is that 1 out of 10 patients develops addiction. So for me as a clinician, and I became a medical doctor, to provide as much as possible for the society. That was my goal. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't sign up for this. I'm creating almost 3 to 5 addicts every week, week after week after week. I don't like this. Like we must be able to do something about it. So I had my colleague back then during my orthopedic time, and we thought to ourselves, well, why don't we just tackle this ourselves? It can't be that difficult. And we looked through the guidelines and create a treatment plan, provide the patients with a treatment plan, provide them with education, and give them a safe and secure continuum of care once they're discharged. We thought to ourselves, all right, these are great guidelines, but they are absolutely unrealistic because nobody has these resources to be able to do all this. We don't have the time, anything. We started talking to clinicians in the US, Canada. Yeah, it's the same story there. So we thought, okay, well, we might be able to begin somewhere. So we decided to enter a hackathon. And, we had a really limited knowledge of programming, but we knew R, which is like a statistical programming language. Mm-hmm. And we just manipulated the code a little bit, and we created a website through R and entered this hackathon. We were the only healthcare workers there. It was just, computer scientists. And we won the hackathon. And I guess it's because we had a domain knowledge we knew exactly how, we wanted it to be. And then it became viral in Iceland, this really simple web page, just to create treatment plans in 20, 30 seconds with a nice interface, print it out and hand it to the patient. That was enough. That was 10 times better than what we already have. But then it really started, growing in Iceland, and we got like virality here. So we had over 10,000 treatment plans generated only in Iceland. And our users started giving us feedback, and they asked us to build a more comprehensive system. So now we were faced with a problem. Are we supposed to keep on practicing as doctors, or are we supposed to tackle this huge problem, which looks like it's getting organic growth? And we also knew that, everything, was in flames in the US and, other countries. So we thought, we actually might be able to provide more service to more than just Iceland, So, let's do that. And we knew that we would never get funding to create this platform through, let's say, grants through the hospital or something like that. So we had to build a company or startup. We did that, got grants, got funding, or $600,000, something like that, and a little bit additionally. So we managed to create this system that we have today. And we conducted research and have really spent the last 2 years on R&D. And now we're implementing the system, and we're implementing it here in Iceland. And we're working with the Ministry of Health and all the health systems here. And then we're also implementing it in Newfoundland and Canada, which surprisingly, I didn't know anything about Newfoundland before. But it's an island, just like Iceland. And it has, roughly 600,000 people. So it's a relatively small cohort. But then again, it's a great test bed to prove this concept and just implement it. And also on a nationwide scale. And get traction, because we have to face it. In the world, we are the underdogs. This is Iceland and Newfoundland, so we just really then have to show that we can do this ourselves, and we can really provide a big use case and on a nationwide basis, and then getting the traction to kind of like expand us to more sectors. And really our target is going to the US. I mean, that's where the problem is prevalent. And we're not going to fix this with getting everybody on methadone and Suboxone. It's just not sustainable.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurists podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific, and the FinTech 5. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network, and Next Gen Banker. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
So you're the underdog. What's the flip side of that? What's the advantage of being in Iceland and starting this company in Iceland?
Well, I'd say there are about 2,000 doctors practicing in Iceland, and I'd say I know most of them, so that's a good thing. And also I have a reputation here, so people know that they know what I stand for, and they know my journey, and they know I am in this. So it also helps me to get this product forward, because let's face it, healthcare systems, they tend to be really conservative, and it's hard to access funds, hard to get revenue. So that all helps, and that really is a basis, especially in health tech today, to just get it out there, get it implemented, and start gaining even just a little bit of revenue. If you manage to do that, you're further along than 90% of the other health tech startups. It's just so hard to get in the system. So I guess that really gives us an advantage, especially when talking to VCs. So we can say that we're creating revenue, we have it implemented. Okay, it's in Iceland and Newfoundland, but still, we are still walking on 2 feet, and we're still people. So it kind of gives the initial traction. I'd say it's a good place to start.
How about the startup ecosystem here? How has that worked for you?
Oh, brilliantly. I mean, I'm a medical doctor, and we tend to just be in the academia and not knowing anything. I mean, I remember when I began in this journey, I didn't even know what a business model was. I didn't even know what networking was. So I just entered the whole startup ecosystem here and went through these accelerators that we have, which are kind of built on top of each other. So always expanding your knowledge. And I just looked at it like I was in medical school. I was just going to suck in as much information as I could in order to be, as good of an entrepreneur as I could be. So, yeah, that I did. And it taught me a lot of things to, kind of stand on my own 2 feet and be able to interact and just build all of this and, get advisors in and try to understand them. Of course, not being a business professional myself. But then again, I have the domain knowledge. I know how that works. And, we can complement each other. So I think it just has kind of rapidly complemented into a, larger scale operation.
What are the next steps?
The next steps is we have pilots now in Iceland and Newfoundland, and we're hoping to set up one in Denmark as well, a large scale pilot. During all these pilots, we're conducting clinical research as well. So really what we want to do, because we already conducted a smaller scale research, but now we want to get this really bulletproof clinical validation, because that's the core of everything. That's the core of the business model. That's the core of the value that we create. So that's the next thing, and also just get it implemented. Then we scale out, I would say relatively quickly once we're out there in the health system, and it's about to start probably next month. Then when we prove the success case, then I want to start scaling Western Canada, and then I want to go down in the States. And I want to work with. I know that there are a lot of big organizations in the US that would really need this. I know that Veterans Affairs, that would be a great place to start with. And in Canada as well. In BC, they have a huge problem there. So yeah, I really want to get this out there where the problem, is really, really hitting the societies hard. So yeah, I wanna create this success case here, and then just show them like, look, we can do this. Just let's do something real.
Well, tell me a little bit more about the business model and the funding. And you've mentioned VCs. Like, how far along are you? In terms of the funding cycle, and what's that look like from here?
Yeah. So we are fundraising at the moment, and we have a lead investor called Crowberry Capital, which is, I'd say, one of the, in my opinion, like the superstar VCs here in Iceland. They're also in Denmark, and they're one of the largest female-run VCs in Europe, and really cool set of founders there, and they're leading the round. And we've yet to finish it, but we've gotten a few smaller co-investors on board. But I hope to finish it in the next, 12, 16 weeks, something like that. I would say, like, in my discussions now with, investors that invest in Healthtech, because, it's getting a little dry out there, in the VC funding market. So I feel like everything has shifted now towards, like, are you generating revenue? It's more towards kind of like this core, core aspects of startups. So I feel that has been like a trend that I've seen.
This is your A round?
No. This is a pre-seed round.
Pre-seed?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good thing. We funded ourselves for such a long time through bootstrapping with grants. And it's a really good grant system here in Iceland. So I would say, like, if you'd be elsewhere, we would probably be in our seed round now. Late seed round probably.
How much are you targeting for your pre-seed?
2 million euros.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a relatively large pre-seed round, but then again, I don't know, Healthtech rounds, they sometimes tend to be a little larger.
Well, the scope and scale of the things you're trying to address are larger.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the risk is bigger, but so is the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, like, what I really have to do is, it's all about, like, onboarding the right people to help us. We need, canons out there to help us, because, like I said, this is a conservative field, so we really gathered good people, leading pain specialists in Canada, in our beachhead market, to, as our advisors, like research scientists that have been really engaged in like research within the field of opioid and such. We got a former state senator from Maine as our chairman of the board, to kind of like, have this US connection as well. And I just created like a network of people that I know that could help us, as we branch into the US, just to kind of like prepare everything, I'd say.
So what are you hearing from the primary care physicians who are engaging with the program today?
So they love the fact that they can actually offer their patients some sort of solution. That's number one. Number two, they love being able to offer their patients a digital health solution that looks really nice and gives the patients good support while they're at home. They love that. They feel really good about that. And I would say the third thing is that they really like just knowing that, their patients are getting better treatment than before.
You think, are they in a similar situation where you were, where you knew what needed to be done, but the realities of taking care of your patients in your practice, you didn't have that ability, so they're welcoming this as an opportunity?
Yeah, I'd say like I would, to be realistic, I would separate them in two groups. One would be really, really like accepting towards digital health and innovation in their practice. But then we have the others that, they're too busy, they have the shovel sticking in the ditch and they're really tired and they just don't want to see a solution out there because they're too busy.
The old, turning down the chainsaw salesman because they're busy chopping down trees.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a good analogy, yeah. So I've seen a fair share of that. And also I've seen some, I would say, some of the surgeons that I've spoken to, I was in orthopedics myself, so I kind of like understand that group, but they're a funny breed of people. So they would normally say, well, we prescribe opioids for only 7 to 14 days. It's not our problem. So yeah, you kind of like, okay, I see. All right, we have to talk to, where is the problem really hitting the hardest? It's where the refills are being made. That's where the problem is.
Well, that sounds like these silos that exist are part of the reason why it's been easy for the dependency and addiction to grow, right? Because there isn't a clear line of who's responsible for that.
It's fragmented.
Yeah.
And another really interesting thing is that a lot of funding has been funneled towards addiction treatment, which is great. I mean, we need that. But then again, sometimes technology tends to follow the funding. So we've had a lot of, new startups, which I think are doing great in addiction treatments. But then again, addiction treatments, we're only focusing at the very end and at the really, I would say, the most complicated stage of the opioid journey. It's when people have developed addiction. This is when people are so desperate to get their, fix, get their doses that they're, they will go to, some measures as like stealing from your own family or, and you're injecting yourself, sometimes with like fentanyl or heroin. And this is not the right place to come in. This is the first point of contact. We're supposed to do it more upstream. That's where people are more susceptible. I hope that we'll be able to get there, in the next year or two. And I know for sure that I'm going to take part of trying to get us there, because it's just more realistic having an upstream intervention.
It's the right place to start.
It is the right place to start.
Yeah. So when you think about the marketplace in which you're operating, because there's the clinical need, right? Then there are the business needs. Mm-hmm. So who are your primary competitors today, and who do you think may emerge as, either direct competitors or structural competitors to you?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the focus of, our competitors, even though they are more of indirect competitors, are the Healthtech startups and companies that are focused on addiction treatments. They're using digital health and other ways to provide better addiction treatments, which I think is great. But then again, we're more focusing on the upstream side of things, and then we are a system. We have a lot of components. We have clinician-based components, we have patient-based components in our system, but we have a lot of these scattered, maybe small-scale components that, for example, have an app for patients to taper themselves down, and the app isn't connected to any clinicians or anything like that, and the patient has to pay for itself and pay for themselves, and they have to kind of be educated that now they have to taper themselves down. I would say all these are barriers to entry of some sort, and also I wouldn't recommend patients to taper themselves down with opioids. It's dangerous. If you're not doing it at the right pace, you can relapse back to the original dose, and you've lost your tolerance for it, and then you can overdose in the worst case. So you definitely should do it with healthcare professionals, most definitely. Or if you go with benzodiazepines, you can get seizures if you do it too quickly. We have this, and then of course we have some tapering generators, which are mostly just standalone websites here and there. But then again, they're standalone. They are not connected to any, continuum of care or any platforms. You have to print it out for the patient, or and the interface is, I would say, suboptimal. A lot of times it's been created with not that much funding, so the interface is bad. We're trying to gather all of this into one system, because that's really what the providers out there need, and the payers as well. So I would say that's our competitive advantage, and this upstream focus, that's our niche.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening to The Futurist this week. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy the show, please, leave us a review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tweet us out on social, on X, or contact us on Facebook, or just basically post about the show. It all helps and helps people find the content. But thanks again for listening to The Futurists. And as normal, we'll see you in the future.